Yes. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, depending on where you're coming in from. I see we have people from all over the world. Really quick, Mohan, how's my microphone? Is it okay?
Your microphone is great. I'm just trying to see if I can see you on video. Just let me double confirm.
Um, sure. Yeah, it looks like I'm here. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide. We have a ton to discuss today. So in my conversations with some of our streaming customers, what I can tell you about this space is that people come from all walks of life. And by that, I mean, some customers are very technical. Like Oliver right now, the presentation he just gave, and we have customers that are very successful in this space as well that are not technical. So I'll try to give a balanced presentation around that and discuss. First, we'll set a point of reference on what is streaming, and then we'll dive right into optimizing your streaming, and we'll also discuss some things that are going on the DigitalOcean platform, and then go through some takeaways. So, what is streaming? Please click twice, Mohan. This is an animation. So I tried to make this as fun as possible. I really like images, and they keep me engaged. So, what is streaming depends who you ask. Please go ahead, Mohan. So as you can see from our chat and our diverse clients, streaming touches every industry. Please go ahead. So one industry that is heavily impacted by streaming is obviously marketing, advertisement, streaming ads. All of us know now that you're surfing on your phone or you say pizza, and then you'll get commercials on the television, on your phone, everywhere for pizza. So it's been very effective for ads, and so streaming is very important in the marketing industry. Please go ahead. Take a special note to this picture. Streaming media is a huge segment, and a huge segment of our customers doing streaming. And it could be anything from like short form videos like TikToks. It could be podcasts, vlogs, and then meetings like Zoom that we're on right now. Please go ahead. You can click twice. So put that asterisk just to pay special attention to that image. Another really big segment of streaming is finance. They deal with lots of data, and the faster you are to get and deliver data, the more money you make. And you can, if you're milliseconds or just a short amount of time late, you could be missing out on a lot of money. Please go ahead. Modern architectures. Now, the past couple, maybe like five to 6 years, modern architectures are using streaming data. They're replying to events in real time. They're using microservices, and there's things like Edge and IoT that are heavy into streaming. And this isn't the typical use case that many people outside of tech think of. For people outside of tech, streaming usually involves video. But when you think about it, streaming really is data in real time. Please go ahead. So what is streaming? Streaming, when you get down to it and you eliminate video, you eliminate finance, all these other things, it really is continuous streaming, continuous data. It's transferring data in real time, and typically it's large amounts of data. Videos are really large files, and so I love Star Trek. I'm a huge dork, so yeah, data intensifies. Please, next slide. So back to this picture. This was one of the previous slides on live streaming videos, and so how does this image make you feel? I guess it depends on where you're at as far as planning your streaming architecture, how technical you are, how much experience you have in this industry. If you're barely getting started, and even though you want as many customers as possible, because it'll make your business better, this could cause you anxiety if you're not exactly prepared to have the sudden influx of people streaming video on your platform or sharing videos or whatever it might be. This can cause you anxiety. It can cause you stress, and maybe that's because you do need to update your system in some way. Please, next slide. And yeah, go ahead and click. So streaming apps need to have these things. So we've cut down like the best attributes for a streaming application. And these are the things that our streaming clients are looking for. Speed, reliability, and scalability. Those are the top three. The rest have to do with all of those. You definitely want the lowest latency possible. You want to deliver your data fast. You want it to be reliable. You don't want people struggling. You know, a lot of times if you're watching Netflix and it won't play, you'll just switch to a different app. So it's really important to be reliable, and you need to deal with scale. So whenever your app gets to that next level, you want to be able to deal with that demand. So you want a well thought out architecture, and you want to take really strategic technical decisions depending on your use case. Next slide, please. So now let's get into it. Now that we're all on the same page, let's get into it. So the first step, go ahead please, Mohan, is and click again for the image. That way. So the first step is choosing the right droplet. So the virtual machine is the foundation for success. Even if you're on bare metal right now, the way you shape your virtual machines will have a cascading effect down to your applications. Please, next image. So this was one of the questions we had in our quiz. Dedicated versus shared vCPU. Typically, streaming startups, businesses, they want to be using dedicated vCPU rather than shared vCPU. So the differences between the two, if you're unfamiliar, virtual machines have this thing called a hypervisor. They have a network that they talk to each other. Dedicated vCPUs have an exact partition of the CPU, and they have direct access to computing power. Shared computing power means that you don't have necessarily the guaranteed CPU at the time you request it. So for instance, if you're using a small amount less than what you're allotted, and suddenly you request more CPU, that has to be freed up from somewhere before you can reach your maximum potential of computing power. Next slide, please. So make sure you're on dedicated CPU for your streaming workloads. That's a generalization, of course, but my best advice is to tailor your workload. So your front end, you probably can have like a bursty application that doesn't need dedicated CPU. So maybe you could save some money there, but make sure your streaming workloads do have dedicated computing power, as often they require a high number of transactions, and your clients really want that speed. In general, we have currently, within dedicated CPU, we have 4 options at DigitalOcean that you can tailor your workload to. So we have a storage optimized droplet, general purpose droplets, memory optimized, and CPU optimized. In general, our streaming clients, they put their workloads on CPU optimized droplets. And the reason for that is because usually those applications do require dedicated computing power, but they typically don't need a lot of memory. So there you can save some money on CPU. If you have applications or services that need more memory, then of course the memory droplets. Storage optimized droplets are the most expensive droplets we have, but because they're incredible, I'd say workhorses that typically are used for like data warehouses, really high performance use cases typically use those storage optimized droplets. And if you don't know what to do, then typically people choose general purpose droplets. And the way I like to describe those droplets is they're a little bit more beefier. They're in general, they're really powerful. In general, can deal with a lot of use cases. So those are a little bit more expensive than CPU optimized droplets for those reasons. Next slide, please. So like Oliver said, staying close to your customers is really important. So yes, data centers are important, but they don't necessarily mean that you're going to get to your clients faster. CDNs, points of presence, typically called in industry, they're called POPs or CDN POPs, and caching are typically going to be your best bets for delivering quickly to your customers. CDNs are geographically distributed servers, and they often come with a network of points of presence, which are more servers that way your customers don't have to go through all the way through the public internet to your origin server to get the content they need. They go on a private CDN network that delivers their content quickly. Now, caching. What is caching? Caching is storing parts of the data that you're serving on one of these distributed CDN POPs, and they're usually it's a lot faster, and since the data is already close to your clients, it gets to them a lot faster than requesting to the origin server. So that might be a little bit counterintuitive to what people typically think. So CDN and points of presence are very powerful. Just a small reminder, DigitalOcean does have a free CDN as part of our using spaces, in case you weren't aware. Next slide, please. So this is something, I'll go over this really quickly since Oliver went into depth about adaptive bitrate, but I'll say it in a different way since some of us aren't as technical as Oliver. He's super technical. Adaptive bitrate, the way I like to explain it is limiting the content that you're serving to your customers depending on what they're able to receive. So you detect, using adaptive bitrate, you detect what device they're on. They might be on their cell phone. They might not have good internet. They might not have good download speeds. You detect that first, and you have your data stored on the CDN network, ready for them to receive, and you have it at different levels. You might have it at 1080p, 920p, all the way down to 240p, and you then detect, like, let's say they can only receive at that moment 1040p, then you'll send that small file to them at 1040p, and customers love this because that's, even if you send a video at 1080p and they can't receive it, that'll cause them issues. They love this because they get their content right away in the best way for them to consume it, and typically they understand that they're receiving the best content at the time. So next slide, please. So this is just like a funny thought experiment. Um, oh, looks like we lost the lost our
Sorry.
slides. Oh, no worries.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the GIF is someone using a hands-free headset to make dinner while they're working on the phone, with their colleagues. So how does this impact your streaming business? Next slide. Our advice is to automate everything. Oliver made this point in his own way, but the more you automate, the more it frees you up to work on those high impact things that deliver the most for your business. So I'm automating everything. Nowadays you can automate everything from building all the way down to production. So you can have a really efficient pipeline. Next image, please. Next slide, please. So there's typically three ways to introduce automation. One is Kubernetes. If you're unfamiliar, it's a container orchestrator that can repair itself. It can auto-scale. It can deliver applications on its own. You can segment traffic. It's incredibly customizable. It's open source. And yeah, it's just, I love Kubernetes. Not just saying that because it's the main product that I work with. CI/CD, DevOps, SRE, those are many different types of words of having automated pipelines that will take your code, build it, deploy it, do automatic testing, monitoring, and in the end, get that to production. Infrastructure as code are things like Terraform, and Ansible, Pulumi, and they typically they'll do things like provision your virtual machines, and all these things are usually used in conjunction. So you're usually using CI/CD on top of Kubernetes, or using CI/CD to create your Kubernetes infrastructure, and using infrastructure as code to provision VMs, things like that. There's very little actual hands-on. Once you have your pipeline ready, there's very little you need to do afterwards. Next slide, please. So really quickly, DigitalOcean Kubernetes offers a lot of this automation. We have a lot of one-click deployments to Kubernetes, which are called Helm charts that can, with one click, you'll have monitoring, you'll have a cert manager, you'll have ingress. With one click, you can have a CI/CD like Argo CD or Tecton pipelines. So you could get up and running on DigitalOcean Kubernetes super quickly and have automation already into your streaming work. Next slide, please. I'm trying to go as fast as I can since we're running low on time. So Atom Learning is one of our customers that uses a couple of Kubernetes clusters. They also use CI/CD. They do a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence to optimize their content and questions. And what they do is they're an adaptive learning platform for kids that did really well, especially during the pandemic where this was so necessary. Ever since they created their whole architecture, they've had very little to do to update it, because like once you have all your automation ready, there's not a lot of changes you need to make for your infrastructure. So that's one of the reasons they've been able to grow so quickly on DigitalOcean, seeing 50% growth month to month. Next slide, please. So the last thing, and definitely not one of the least important, but maximizing your efficiency to reduce bandwidth costs is really important in the streaming industry, because people doing streaming usually spend a lot of their, a lot of their budget on bandwidth costs, since that's a lot of what they're going to be doing. So we advise typically to use the right codec, either H.264 and AVI for online video streaming. Of course, all the other things that we mentioned, using a memory cache, using CDN, POPs, microservices, some things that Oliver mentioned, like monitoring your infrastructure and seeing where, if you find any patterns where you could increase efficiency, deploy to a different area. And next slide, please. One of the best ways to, and easiest ways to maximize your bandwidth costs is choosing the right cloud provider. So DigitalOcean is, we have probably the best prices in the industry for bandwidth costs. Data transfer within the network is free. Every droplet comes with a free allowance of bandwidth starting at 1,000 gigabytes a month and scales up depending on the droplet you choose. And then you can add all your free bandwidth together, and depending on how you use it, you can have really low costs. And I'll explain that in the next slide quickly. So to explain our bandwidth pooling, so every droplet has a free allotment of bandwidth. Let's say you get the smallest droplet possible with 1,000 gigabytes a month free. So you have two of these droplets, A and B. So in total, you have 2,000 gigabytes a month free total. One of those droplets uses 0 gigabytes because it's just internal traffic communicating to other applications within your network on DigitalOcean. And droplet B transfers 1,800 gigabytes externally a month. Since that's below your 2,000 gigabyte a month free total, you do not spend anything that month on bandwidth. So the more droplets you have, the larger allowance you have as well. You add all that together. And anything that you do go over will be at 1 cent per gigabyte. Let me see. Yes, I think that might be a typo. Yeah, good catch. It's not 10 cents, it's 1 cent. So, yeah, yeah, thanks, good catch. So to next slide, please. So on one of our customers that really benefits from this, and I really love telling this story, is Loot TV. Loot TV does streaming. They stream content to people, and by watching that content, then you can get prizes and money and things of that nature. This is a global company that's really successful. They're on DigitalOcean Kubernetes, and one thing I find so interesting and like really shocking, to be honest, is this company was started by kids in high school. They were juniors in high school when they started the company, and they ended up learning Kubernetes on DigitalOcean over an afternoon and evening, and were set up by the next day. So this is a good case study to show people that say, hey, Kubernetes is way too difficult. It's too much of a tech debt. On DigitalOcean, we do try to make our products as simple as possible. So maybe you might be brave enough and give Kubernetes a chance. So as you look at, yeah, thank you. Next slide. Origin Media also uses a ton of bandwidth. They do that streaming advertisement, that connected advertisement, and so they're often streaming to your device, to your television, to your computer, all at the same time. And they have to deal with around 40,000 queries per second, with 7 outbound connections to ad partners to receive good requests. Like you see from their quotes, they're heavy on bandwidth, and they benefit greatly from deducting the bandwidth costs that they have. Go ahead, Mohan. So the key takeaways for our presentation are: number one, plan for growth. Make sure you're ready once your startup, your business goes to the next step. Automate as much as possible, and know where your audience is to make sure that you can serve them as fast as possible.